I want you to envision a scenario where a country is unable to print its currency or make decisions about its monetary policy, because this is the current situation for many African nations in general. For way too long, Africa used a variety of currencies that reflected local influences. In many regions, traditional forms of currency such as cowrie shells, gold dust, and locally minted coins were commonly used for trade and daily transactions. That is a fact. Before the imposition of colonial currencies and the eventual introduction of the CFA Franc, many African societies had their own established monetary systems and methods of trade. These systems varied widely across the continent and were often sophisticated and well integrated into the local economies and cultures. In West Africa, for example, gold dust and gold coins were widely used in powerful empires such as the Mali Empire and the Ashanti Empire. Cowrie shells were another common form of currency, especially in the coastal regions of West Africa, where they facilitated trade both locally and with foreign merchants. Additionally, various kingdoms and states minted their coins, which were used alongside other forms of currency for trade and tribute. In East Africa, the Swahili coast was part of the extensive Indian trade network, and as a result, various forms of currency were used, including silver coins from Arabia, Persia, and India. The trade cities like Kilwa and Mombasa and Zanzibar were hubs of economic activity, where these foreign currencies circulated alongside locally recognized forms of money. In Central and Southern Africa, barter systems that saw transactions of goods for goods often prevailed, but there are also regions where specific items such as iron tools, copper rods, or salt served as a medium of exchange. These items were highly valued and recognized as currency within and between various communities. With a bustling monetary system, we can confidently say that African societies could sort of print their own money and control their monetary policy, which is a crucial benefactor for any country because it directly impacts the nation's economic sovereignty, stability, and development. When a country can print its own money, it maintains economic independence, allowing it to make decisions that best suit its national interests. This independence is vital for responding effectively to economic challenges and opportunities without being overly dependent on external entities, later on being able to control its monetary policy, which enables a country to manage inflation rates more effectively. But then it happened. The French. The arrival of France disrupted these indigenous monetary systems. The colonial administrations introduced European currencies to facilitate control over economic transactions and integrate the colonies into the broader imperial economy. By forcefully establishing colonial currencies pegged to the French franc and later the CFA franc, France ensured that the economies of its African colonies were tied closely to its own, a move that limited their monetary sovereignty and economic independence, but also marked a significant shift from the diverse and autonomous economic practices that had existed before European colonization, entrapping these countries into a loop of generational exploitation. Up to this day, 14 African nations with an approximate population of 200 million people are forced to use the CFA franc as their currency. The French central bank is responsible for printing, transporting, and safeguarding the reserves of the CFA franc. This whole process might seem like just another logistical operation, but it is not. This is a financial strategy that keeps these countries closely tied to France. I'll give you an example. Every year, these countries are required to deposit a minimum of over 50% of their foreign exchange reserves into the French treasury, making these nations dependent, which means that their economic stability is directly linked to decisions made in Paris rather than in their own capitals. A significant portion of their national budgets, which could have been used for development projects, ends up being reserved deposits in France. This system is not simply an economic arrangement, but a continuation of colonial control under a different guise. France benefits from the CFA franc system primarily through the control of monetary policy and reserves. You should know that the CFA franc is pegged to the euro and guaranteed by the French treasury, which requires African countries to deposit a significant portion of their foreign exchange reserves in the French central bank, as I mentioned earlier. This arrangement gives France leverage over these economies, ensuring that a substantial portion of their wealth flows into French financial institutions and supports the French economy. Additionally, the use of the CFA franc facilitates favorable trade terms for France, more on that later, and allows French companies to dominate key sectors in these countries, further channeling wealth back to this system leads to a substantial economic advantage, with estimates suggesting it amounts to approximately $500 billion annually. Imagine a continent rich in resources yet perpetually impoverished. How could such a paradox exist? The answer lies in the systematic extraction of Africa's wealth by foreign powers. And for this video, we will say particularly France. In the heart of the earth, where the sun's light gleams, lies a land of wealth beyond our dreams. Africa, your soil is so rich and grand, with treasures untold in every strand. Gold in your rivers, glittering bright. Diamonds that sparkle through the night. Beneath your plains, oil flows free. In your mountains, secrets of rare beauty, uranium, copper, and gems untold. A continent of riches, pure as gold. In your embrace, a land of splendor, strength, and grace. Africa, the cradle of life and might. Your resources shine with endless light, a testament to your endless worth, a jewel of nature on this earth. We all know that words could not do justice to the richness of the motherland. Consider the vast mineral wealth of countries like Mali, Niger, and Gabon, which are forever rich in gold, uranium, and oil, respectively. In Mali, the gold mines of Sadiola and Morila have been operational for decades, generating substantial profits. Mines that have been producing hundreds of thousands of ounces of gold annually contribute significantly to Mali's GDP. It is, however, unfortunate that France, just like many other evil players, knows about the vast richness and has continuously paved ways to have a share. For a very long time, French multinational corporations such as Anglo Gold Ashanti, and I Am Gold, both of which have substantial French investments, have historically taken a significant share of these minerals. According to trusted sources, Mali loses out on approximately $100 million annually due to unfair profit sharing and tax avoidance by foreign companies. It is not just Mali. In Niger, a French company known as Areva, which is now part of Orano, has operated the country's uranium mines for more than 50 years. Niger is the fourth largest producer of uranium globally, a key requirement in advanced scientific research, industrial and medicinal use, military operations, and nuclear power generation. The country sees a significant portion of its valuable production exported to France. It is saddening that after all the vast quantities of uranium mined amounting to over 3,000 tons annually, Niger remains one of the most poorest countries in the world. When we look at several credible reports, we see that Niger receives only a fraction of the value of its uranium, with an estimated annual loss of $150 million due to inequitable contracts and revenue siphoning by foreign entities. Apart from Mali and Niger, the taking hand of France reaches yet another resourceful country, Gabon. With its abundant oil reserves, the country has for long been a target for French exploitation. French oil company known as Total has long dominated Gabon's oil sector, just like a tick sucking off a cow. The country produces 200,000 barrels of oil per day, yet the economic benefits are disproportionately reaped by Total and other foreign firms. Gabon's oil wealth, which could significantly boost its economy, instead contributes to an estimated $1 billion in annual revenue for Total. While local communities face poverty and environmental degradation, these are just a few of the countries to mention for the sake of saving your valuable time. This relentless extraction of resources has allowed France to bolster its economy, while African nations, rich in minerals and resources, remain ensnared in poverty. The wealth generated from Africa's resources has funded French industries, infrastructure, and economic growth, perpetuating a cycle of dependency and underdevelopment in its former colonies. By controlling the extraction and trade of these valuable resources, France has ensured that the economic benefits flow primarily to its own coffers, leaving the local populations with environmental damage, economic instability, and the legacy of exploitation. This exploitation highlights the deep-rooted inequities and ongoing colonial dynamics that continue to disadvantage African nations while enriching France and its citizens. Or as we say, there would be no France without Africa. After examining the theft of financial control and policies, as well as resource exploitation, I believe I should now reveal another covert method that France employs to exploit the wealth of Africa. I want you to imagine a web of influence that extends far beyond borders, shaping economies, cultures, and politics. This is the reality of France's dominance in its former African colonies, where economic exploitation interlaces with cultural and political control. Consider the case of Senegal, a former French colony in West Africa. Decades after gaining independence, Senegal remains economically reliant on France, its former colonial master. French multinational corporations dominate key sectors of the Senegalese economy, from telecommunications to to banking, extracting profits that flow back to France. Meanwhile, Senegalese artisans struggle to compete with imported French goods, perpetuating a cycle of dependency. The cultural influence of France is equally pervasive. French language and culture are promoted as symbols of prestige and modernity, while indigenous languages and traditions are marginalized. When you think of the country's education systems, which prioritize French language instruction, internalizing a colonial mindset and reinforcing social hierarchies based on language fluency. If you think you have heard of the most bizarre part of the story, wait until I tell you about the French interference in the politics of its ex-colonies. Like it or not, Africans have tried to get rid of their predators for generations, but yet France remains a constant presence in the affairs of its former colonies. The country maintains military bases across Africa, ostensibly for security cooperation but often serving to protect French economic interests, meaning being able to steal resources and influence local politics, which means eradicating non-corrupt African leaders who are likely to expose this sinister side of France, or even rebel French presence in their countries. Silencing such capable individuals through staged assassinations or working to oust them from power has always been a way to serve this French colonial grip on many African nations. Moreover, French administrations have been known to intervene in African elections, supporting leaders deemed favorable to French interests and destabilizing regimes perceived as hostile. Hostile as in wanting to be independent or stopping the steal. All of this is not far-fetched from what most of you have heard about. You probably heard of some of the murders of African revolutionaries who were executed by France to help maintain a forever thieving grip. Yes, the history of African independence movements is fraught with instances of violence, suppression, and targeted assassinations orchestrated by colonial powers, including France, to maintain control over their former colonies. Throughout the decolonization period that I talked about earlier, numerous African revolutionaries and independence leaders were targeted for their activism and perceived threats to colonial interests. One notable example is the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. Lumumba was a charismatic leader who advocated for Congolese independence and opposed Belgian colonial rule. Following the DRC's independence in 1960, Lumumba's government faced opposition from Belgian and Western interests due to its socialist leanings and calls for nationalization of resources. In 1961, Lumumba was captured by Congolese rivals supported by Belgium and subsequently handed over to Belgian and American-backed forces. He was executed under murky circumstances, widely believed to have been ordered by Western powers to eliminate a perceived threat to their interests in the region. And just for the record, every time you hear Western interests or American interests, ABCD interests, just know that someone is summing up a complex set of economic, political, cultural, and strategic objectives pursued by the mentioned countries in pursuit of power, influence, and prosperity on the global stage at the cost of the other country. While you let that sink in, let me give you another example. Have you heard of the case of Thomas Sankara? If not, he was the former president of Burkina Faso who led a Marxist revolution in the 1980s aimed at transforming the country and challenging neocolonial influences. Sankara implemented progressive policies focused on social justice, women's rights, and self-reliance, earning him admiration among many in Africa and beyond. He had many anti-colonial reforms, which annoyed many, including the French. His anti-imperialist stance drew opposition from Western powers and corrupt local elites who stood to lose from his agenda. So, in 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup led by his close associate, Blaise Compaoré, who had reportedly worked to serve Western interests. These are just a few examples of the targeted violence and political assassinations carried out by colonial powers and their praxis to suppress African liberation movements and maintain control over their former colonies. Such actions have had lasting repercussions on the political landscape and socio-economic development of many African nations, underscoring the enduring legacy of colonialism and imperialism on the continent, while somehow keeping colonialism alive even after its perceived eradication. I am sure that it is now clear to you that this multifaceted domination that deprives Africa of its monetary rights, control, and policy drafting is evil. The domination that sees Africa lose millions of its resources every day is unfair. The domination that allows France to intervene on political settings and dynamics of African countries is unjust. How can these countries ever develop with such a shady entanglement? I mean, France is more than dedicated to maintaining control over its former colonies to ensure that French citizens can have electricity at the cost of Africans, running water at the cost of Africans, that French companies continue to thrive at the cost of African resources, that African cultural norms align with French values, and that political systems remain subservient to French interests. When I look at all of this now, I sometimes wonder if having an abundance of resources that everyone else desires is a curse for Africa. However, I also believe that finding a way to share these resources in a mutually beneficial manner would be the best solution. Unfortunately, Western greed often prevents cooperation, and so, while officially independent, African nations continue to grapple with the legacies of colonialism, trapped in a web of economic exploitation, cultural subjugation, and political interference that continues to generate money for many countries in Arabia, Asia, America, and Europe at large. Did you know that not all passports offer the same level of protection and freedom for their holders in the global travel landscape? Some passports can significantly limit your global mobility and expose you to various risks. For those of you who are subscribed to our channel, you are now aware of the exploitation of African wealth by France, as discussed in this video. However, this is not the only form of separation African citizens are dealing with. As we mentioned in our previous episode, there is another tool used to hinder people from the former colonies of Europe. Even if you are not subscribed, you can still watch and learn a lot from that episode. Click here to watch it, and click here to subscribe. Make sure to check it out and discover how the passport you hold can be a key or a barrier to your freedom and security while traveling. Thanks for sticking around and have a wonderful day.